Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. My name's Harold and Rachel's here with me. Hey, Rachel, how's it going?
Pretty good. Pretty good. It feels like it's been a while. We kind of are like, how do we do this?
We took a break. We took a couple weeks off here, didn't we? And now we've forgotten everything.
It wasn't like purposeful or anything. It just happened because you are working some crazy. We work completely opposite schedules. Number one,
I've been really busy with the garden. Has been the main thing with me.
Yeah.
I put in a bunch of extra garden beds this year, and I've been hauling in mulch, and I've been shoveling, and it's been a busy gardening. And now the garden is done. It's in.
But it looks
Well,
so cool.
done.
I saw
Never
pictures
done,
of it finally.
Yeah. So
that's
really why we've been kind of slow getting the podcast out, because we've been busy. You got your house stuff going on. I've had garden stuff going on, which we're getting ready to hear all about. So Rachel, I want to hear, how's the stuff going with the house? What's happening?
Oh man.
I guess for people who don't know, maybe somebody's never listened before. You've got a 20-acre property. You're going to be moving to this 20-acre property, building a house on this 20-acre property.
Yeah. So my lifelong dream, almost 50 years, is coming to fruition, I guess is the word. It's actually going to happen. I can't believe it. It still feels kind of weird. Like I still have moments where I can't believe this is happening. But yeah, we're moving to 20 acres probably January, which is ideal for a homesteader, not ideal if you're from northern Michigan. Because I can almost guarantee you the weekend we want to move, there'll be a snowstorm. Yep, that's how it works. But
so will the builders be working up through the winter then up there?
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That nothing stops people up here.
I mean, they just have to get the foundation and stuff done in this warm weather.
At that point, it will just be some inside stuff.
So it'll just be the inside stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So we so in the last month it went crazy. So it took us 2.5 months to get our construction loan. The process was insane. I've heard it's this way. It doesn't matter what bank you go to. It is not fun. I don't even know how to tell you how not fun and stressful it is, because and then I'm self-employed, which very much complicates things. I had to provide so much paperwork. I felt like I emptied my entire filing cabinet out onto a printer and sent it to him, and it still wasn't enough. It was crazy. So we got through all of that, and it went pretty badly. For some reason, customer service and communication is so poor anymore. It just was mind blowing. But anyways, we made it through that and we signed on the construction loan. That was the beginning of May. And then was it last week? Things are starting to blur together, but I think it was last week. Last week we met the builder and the excavator out there, and we marked where the house is going to be and where the well and the septic are going to be and where the driveway is. And the excavator is going to start on the driveway. So things are moving along right now. I'm trying to get power out there. So I had to figure out what power company it is. And we're getting power out there. So that's the paperwork I was doing today.
Really happening now, isn't it? It's all coming together.
It really is. And it felt weird. So was it Monday? I believe it was Monday. I got an email from the builder and he said, you have an address. And I don't know why, but it felt so crazy. It was like, I have an address. Yeah. And
that's cool.
I went and showed my husband and I was all excited and he was like, oh, and I was like, why
you're going to be taking a mailbox up there next week so you can post your mailbox up, aren't you?
Yeah. So we have a mailing address. And, so that's what I've been doing. I've actually started packing some of my books because I have a very large library and I figure that was low hanging fruit for packing. And,
eating a little extra out of all those jars you have too. So
that's one of the changes that's happening is I'm not going to be canning as much and I'm not growing as much vegetables as normal. We're growing just for eating this year. Because I don't want to move thousands of glass jars, and I literally have thousands of glass jars. So we're not doing that. And then what I am doing though is we're propagating plants because plants are so expensive. So we have turned what was my annual garden into a little bit of a nursery.
Okay. Yeah.
So we've been like dividing hostas and air layering. And I'm pretty new to air. No, I am new to air layering. So if anybody has tips, go ahead and send them. So I'm trying to air layer a bunch of the trees and stuff we have, and we're trying to clone a bunch of plants so that and then we're putting them in the nursery to move over this fall.
Okay.
I just don't want to move them right now because then I'd have to water them all summer. And so far, we don't have a well yet to water with. So we're going to move them in the fall.
I just thought of something. I forgot to ask you. Did your elderberries grow?
I was going to send you a picture. They did. I would have to say you sent me, I don't know how many you said. It was somewhere around
quite
50.
a bunch. Yeah, probably around that box. Yeah, around 50.
It was about 50. I would say out of the 50, about 40.
Oh, awesome.
About 40
Good
lived.
deal.
So I'm super, super excited about that. But
that's awesome.
So I have that, and then I have Comfrey from Nick Ferguson. And then I started a bunch of sea berries. Ben Falk talks about sea berries a lot and how they have a lot of omegas. And so I started a bunch of those, and surprisingly, every single seed sprouted. So I'm going to have like 30 of those. So it's just kind of, I've started my own little nursery so that when we get out there, we can start our food forests. And all
you're right, because those
stuff.
are some of the most expensive things. If you're buying mature, several month old plants and trees and things like that, it's very expensive.
Yeah. And so we also, in our yard here, we have a confirmed male mulberry tree, which means it doesn't put out any fruit.
I have one of those.
Yeah. So that's actually perfect if you want it for fodder, but you don't want it for berries because the berries can make a mess.
Yep.
So I'm gonna clone that or propagate it. We're gonna try a couple of different ways from cuttings and from air layering.
They're fairly easy to.
That's what I've heard. And I thought that's a great tree to practice on because I'm pretty new at it. And then we have a confirmed female one that constantly puts out fruit. So so just stuff like that. And then we have ornamentals like Rosa Sharon and Forsythia and, all those kinds of things. And, so it's actually been really busy. We watched Permaculture Orchard like 3 times over the last 2 weeks, taking notes for what we want to do in our little orchard.
That's a great video.
It is. I love his approach to it.
He's got a YouTube channel.
He does. And apparently now he has a website with you can take classes. They're not cheap, but I might take a couple of his classes.
There's some pretty good stuff on his YouTube channel. I subscribed to his YouTube channel. There's some pretty good stuff on there.
So do I. And I can't, is it
Stefan? I don't know the last name. It's very, he's up in French Canadian, I think. And so,
I can't say his last name to save my life, but if you Google the Permaculture Orchard, you'll find him on YouTube and his website, but just phenomenal information. Simple. That's what I like about it. It's simple. And,
it just makes a lot of sense the way he does things to reduce pest pressure and disease pressures and, things like that. He
calls it the grocery store method where he's got a ton of stuff growing. He's basically got a permaculture food forest, but he's got chickens and ducks integrated in there. And I just really like that approach. And so anyways, the last few weeks we've been eating asparagus and greens that we do have in the garden. And this was my first year to actually pick my asparagus. So that's fun. But I got to figure out how to move it. I'm a little afraid.
Yeah, when we bought the new property, I had an asparagus bed and it was just getting established for a couple of years. And then I up and changed everything because it was right on the property, right up against the property line where when we bought the next property. So when I changed everything, I moved the fence, I moved everything. I just took that bed out. So then I never started another one. So I have no asparagus bed here.
Oh, really? That's one of our favorite.
Yeah, I'd like to have another one. I think I might have to put another one in at some point.
Yeah, so what I did was, I did a bunch of research and I did have some seed that somebody just gave me for free, which I started, but that takes like 4 or 5 years before.
Yeah, I started mine from seed also.
But what I bought last year and planted them in the spring was I bought 2nd-year crowns. And that's how you can have asparagus pretty quickly.
Yeah, right.
But they're not cheap.
I planned. The thing was, I had some crowns, and I don't know if I just did something wrong or whatever, but they didn't grow. And I planted the seeds, and they did. But of course, they're slow. Everything's really slow getting size and stuff up. But I did plant a few crowns, and they just never even came up. None of them did. And I don't know. I was asked a very good question. Did you plant them upside down? And I'm like, Maybe. I don't know. I don't
It's
know.
possible.
I thought I looked at, maybe the right way to do it when I planted them, but then I started thinking about that later and was like, I may have. I may have planted them
Huh.
upside down or something. Maybe that's why they didn't grow because none of them did.
They look wild when you get them. It's like
Yeah.
spaghetti noodles. Just like
I guess I get used to dealing
massive.
with like crowns of comfrey, which doesn't mean you could do
Yeah,
anything with it and it'll figure it out and come up. So it doesn't matter. So
exactly. Yeah. So that, and then we have strawberries. No strawberries yet, but they're really flowering. And I think we're going to have a
yeah.
bumper crop this year.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
expanded
what's
my bed.
going on here. What about you?
Oh yeah. Putting in the garden. It was a big job. I added, 6 more raised beds. I put in, I did I expanded some other areas like the elderberry kind of grove that I have. I kind of grew it a little bit longer. I planted a bunch more of those. Um, I doubled up the size of my strawberry bed. You were talking about that. So I
Mhm.
actually took a whole nother section about the same, just doubled it basically. And I basically what I did is I went through and they were just getting pretty thick anyway.
Yeah.
So I hadn't been thinning them out. So basically what I did was, and this I thought worked out good because I hadn't actually fed them for a while. So I actually took out rows out of the one bed and I just basically, I took out a whole row of them. And then I would go over like about a foot and a half and took out another row. And I just made like these rows. And then I filled those rows up with compost that I pulled them
Okay.
out to kind of feed the ones on the sides, kind of like
Yeah.
side fed them.
Yeah.
And then I did the same thing when I planted them in the next section bed that I made. I planted them a couple feet apart and then filled them up with compost on the sides like that. And they seem to be doing really good. I had to put row
Thanks.
cover on stuff already because I seen the little white cabbage moths flying around. I was like,
I
oh
don't
no,
even
you
have,
don't.
well, yes, I do. I actually have Brussels sprouts, cabbage, and bok choy going to seed on purpose from last year because I'm trying to save.
Really? Oh, you left it out there. Okay.
But yes, I've seen cabbage moths too.
Yeah, they were
Quite a few
flying
of
all
them.
over the place, and I was like,
Yep.
okay, better get that on. Even though the plants aren't very big, like the cabbage is really small still. It's like I better cover that up if they're going to mutilate it. So I got that covered up. But my biggest problem so far this year has been the birds, especially with my beans. I have had the hardest time getting beans to. I'm going to have to cover them. I've planted them
Yeah.
twice. I've had to plant beans, and they come up, and the birds just fly down and just peck away at
Yep.
them. And it's like, man, they have destroyed all my beans. Nothing else too much, but the beans have been horrible.
They always do that with my sunflower sprouts.
Yeah,
Ugh.
they'll get the sunflower sprouts too, but I
Hmm.
plant a lot of those. But the beans, they've mutilated every bean I've planted pretty much. I've probably planted 100 and there's probably 10 out there.
Oh, wow.
And I replanted just a
You're going to
few
have to
days
cover
ago.
those.
I'm going to have to cover. I replanted just a few days ago and I'm going to have to go out there and cover them, I think. Yeah, because they're just tearing them up. I see them out there pecking away and it's like, man, come on.
That's
And
crazy.
yeah, they've been really bad. And bred the rabbits. They should be having my first batch of baby rabbits this year in a couple weeks.
I'm going to have
But
to
that was
make
a
a
couple
drive
weeks
down to your
ago.
place in the spring to get baby bunnies.
Yeah, we're gonna have plenty of them. Well, they're not gonna be around long. 8 weeks, probably 8 to 10 weeks. Take care of those. But yeah, I usually do a couple batches a year, so I got them all going right
Nice.
now. And then
But
I
you
like doing it. A lot of people like doing them in like one at a time. That way you're not butchering. But what I like to do is just breed like 3 of them, get 3 batches, raise those all up at once, have one big butcher day, get them
kind
all
of
in the
like doing the
freezer.
chicken when you do meat birds.
Yeah, and it's just to me, it's easier than having to once a month go out there and butcher a few. I'd rather set up, do it
Right.
all at once,
No,
and
I hear you.
do 30 of them. 25 or 30 of them all at once, and just fill the
But you
freezer
keep your
up.
breeding stock, right?
Yeah, I keep the
Okay.
breeding
Yeah.
stock. Yeah,
Yeah.
and just take care of all the meat rabbits. Just take care of them all at once. It's just easier, and then you're dealing with them all at once. You feed them all at once, you butcher them all at once, and then I'll take a break for a couple months and then maybe do it again. And then I'll do it again and then I usually just do it twice. I usually do 3 or 4 rabbits bred like twice a year. To be honest, I eat the majority of the rabbits. The kids will eat some. I'll hand some to them when they're around. My wife doesn't really eat them. So I don't need much more that's like a year's worth right there for me.
What do you have? Do you have a buck and 3 does?
3
Or
does, yeah. Buck and 3
just
does right now.
okay?
I should have 2. I should have 2 bucks because you should really
That's what I
have
was
a bag.
wondering.
But I do have a lot of friends that around close to have bucks. So if I had to get access to another buck, I could. Wouldn't be that big of a deal. And I'll rotate the does out occasionally, like every 3 or 4 years. I might raise up some new does but yeah, that's pretty much What's happening here? I mean, I'm just really happy to have the garden pretty much done. I mean, it's never done because I do succession planting. So, probably 3 or 4 weeks, I'm going to start a whole new batch of plants and getting the seeds going. So I can, as I'm pulling, like, there's a lot of radishes are going to come out in like a couple weeks. Probably, I'm going to start pulling radishes. So I'll probably plant some more radishes after that. But then there's going to be, I'm going to be replacing the broccoli and the cauliflower and the cabbage. And there's a lot of stuff that's going to grow and mature early, and I'm going to replace it and have a fall crop as well. Corn is blowing me away. I can't believe how big the corn's already. My corn is already like 8 inches tall.
Wow.
I'm amazed. Yeah, it's like here
the stuff too that Jordy gave you?
Yeah, it's all kind of running about the same height too. It's like I got a whole bed of that, which is that what's it called?
He gave me so many different kinds.
Yeah, this was the I can't
No.
I can't remember
said
what
it once, but I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't. I have it written down. I have it down. But I can't remember that whole bed of that. Now it's more of that's a dent corn, a green corn. And then I have 2 beds of sweet corn, and then I have another bed of glass corn. It's more of a novelty, about half a bed
so
actually.
Pretty though.
But I grew up a few years ago, but I thought I want to grow some more of that because it's just fun to grow, right? So I have a couple rows of glass corn that I'm growing as well.
So what are your plans to do with all of this corn?
Well, of course I want to try grinding the dent corn.
Yeah.
But sweet corn, we're just going to freeze a bunch of it.
Oh yeah.
We eat so much sweet corn. I mean, we'll eat right off we just freeze it on the cob, and then we eat it probably like twice a week. We eat it in our house. We eat a lot of corn on the cob here.
So are you gonna treat the corn with like lime or anything, or are you just gonna grind it and eat it?
I've never ground corn.
What?
Well, I don't. It's all going to be a new experience for me.
If you eat a lot of it, though, obviously you want to nix.
Yeah, we don't have that much. I mean, I have one bed of it. I'm going to have if it does good, I'll probably have like 75 years to 100 years of
cornbread
of that kind. So I don't know how much that will make as far as grinding that up. Probably not a lot.
Yeah.
But I wanted to experiment with it. I was
surprised too. You might be surprised.
I was curious how much I would get out of that and how it would turn out and how to even do it all, because I've never done it and I wanted to. So it's
fun. It's so fun. I love doing experiments like that.
Yeah. So I just wanted to grow some and start messing around with grinding my own corn.
Have some cornbread.
Make some cornbread and things like that. So that's kind of the thing there. And also I was going to say, I think on the last podcast we talked about journaling a little bit, and I've been doing really good with like everything I've planted. I've been putting in my journal. I drew like diagrams of the beds. I numbered all the beds, and I had pages dedicated to those whole beds.
Nice.
And I've went through and I've done everything I planted, how many I've planted, and it's just been fun. And I've got I'm probably 40 pages into this journal with gardening notes already this year. And
you've been better than me.
I've been having a lot of fun with it. It's been really fun. So I have that just sitting out there. When I head to the garden, I take it with me. And I've already actually been writing out some pests already I've had, and the bird issues have been going in there and what to do about it. I'm going to write down my solutions or things I've tried and see how they works. And I'm going to try to do better with the journaling this year, because it's a lot of fun. And I just think it'd be something.
I like that idea.
Cool
I think I might.
Yeah.
Our garden season is just starting here, so maybe I should do that.
Well, honestly, I probably could have done this stuff 2 weeks earlier.
I know, same here.
We had such an early year. And I started 2 weeks before I normally do. And I could have, I think I could even went 2 weeks earlier than that if I'd really wanted to.
So normally I don't plant till May 31st.
Yeah.
But I already have my tomatoes and peppers outside.
Yep. I mean, it's just been amazing. It's blown me away.
Yeah, and the 45-day forecast doesn't even show us getting frost here. So
with the heat we've had, I already have squash plants that are flowering.
Wow.
Yeah. Like yellow squash plants that are flowering.
So you're gonna have a great corn year then.
I mean, it's blowing me away how tall it's getting already. I mean, usually like the saying is knee high by the 4th of July around here. They say that.
Here.
It's gonna be knee high in 3 more weeks. I mean,
wow, that's cool. Well, in that with succession planting, you could get a lot of plantings in it.
I could probably do I might even be able to do a second crop of corn. I don't know.
Right. But although right now, like for us, I've already had lettuce bolt.
Yeah. Yeah. Which actually worries me about that, about the like I was saying, the flowering, the squash plants flowering, but it's kind of early. It's like, they're not really big enough to be flowering yet. I don't think. Is it going to is it because we've had such warm weather that they're just prematurely doing that. I don't know, but
We've had a very warm spring, but I will say, the last couple of years we've been complaining so much about our droughts because you've had one and we've had one. This spring has been just beautiful weather.
yeah, it's been about right.
We've
Yeah.
even had the rain too. So I'm really hopeful that we don't have the drought
I was
problem.
worried a little early on. I said I could have planted a couple weeks earlier, but the temperatures were good, but we were getting a lot of rain at that time. So and
Okay.
it's really why I didn't. So we did get a little, it would have been too much rain really for a garden when it first, if I would have done that. And then, but by the time I got everything in, it's been really just perfect ever since. We get a couple rains a week. It's just been coming in nice. I mean, just been nice showers and then it gets nice and warm for a couple to get like around 80 degrees for a couple days or whatever. And it's like perfect for germination and watching this stuff really take off. So
Same here.
I hope it continues.
Me too. It's been wonderful. And we've talked about this before, but you can water all you want, but you just cannot replace that rain.
Rains. But I put in more rain collection this year too.
That's right,
so even when it comes down to watering, it's going to be rainwater going on, which is still not as good as when it's falling directly from the sky, I don't think. But it's still, I've put in a lot more water collection this year. So, which anyway, all this great garden talk has brought me around to thinking we got a topic today, especially if we're going to be succession planting and things like that. You got to be thinking about keeping that garden really nutrient dense. You got to feed that soil. Those plants are going to require some nutrients. And so today we're going to talk about how to feed your garden. We're going to talk a little bit about compost tea, like weed leach tea, and some other things you can do to really feed your garden. So I thought that would be a good timely thing to talk about because that's basically the next step. It's weed pulling and feeding the garden. That's where we're at now.
Yeah. And I mean, you have done a lot more of this than me. I'm starting more of it and I'm very excited to be able to do it on a larger scale. But you've done a lot more of this than I have.
Yeah. And the reason you need to do that, you think, well, nature doesn't, what's nature do? I mean, you're not out there spreading stuff around. No, but they're dropping it all over the place, right? Right. You have to feed the soil. It'll increase the nutrients. It helps with water retention. It improves now, if it's compost you're putting down, especially, it improves your soil structure. But even just feeding with things like compost tea we're going to talk about will help with the soil structure because it will help it break down what's already in the soil, which will actually change the soil structure a little bit. So,
and then in turn, it improves your health.
Yes.
But, the thing that nature doesn't do too is it doesn't grow things in nearly as intensive as we do.
Right. And that's why we have to supplement it basically.
We pack our gardens in pretty tight. So.
And towards the end, we're going to talk about one of the methods I use, chop and drop. But chop and drop by itself is not enough because that's what nature does. It chops and it just drops. And of course, it don't chop, but we chop and drop and it breaks down a little quicker. But it's by itself is not enough. It's not fast enough, rather. It is enough if you weren't intensely planting.
Right. Exactly.
But because you're trying to you're pulling a lot of those nutrients, which is what you want because you're putting that in your body, right? You're taking those nutrients away and you're feeding yourself with them. So it's good, but you have to replenish that. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Now you can go the route of, even if you're organic, you can go organic commercial fertilizers. There's a lot of good ones out there. Haas makes one, Dr. Earth, Azure Standard, and there's a bunch of other companies that make some. I think they're probably good organic commercial fertilizers. Decent, The things you got to watch for is your NPK, your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, the amounts. It's really hard without a soil test to know what you need. There's some kind of general fertilizers, and it's like, well, which one do you need the most of? Nitrogen is always you always want a lot of nitrogen, right? But sometimes you can overdo the phosphorus or the potassium. And you got a soil test really the only way to know that. So a soil test could be really important. But if you're going to go that route, there's absolutely some good ones. And you'll have 3 numbers on all these, and they'll always be in that order: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So you'll have like a 5-3-2 or a 2-2-2 or a whatever. That's your breakdown. That's what percent. That's basically that percentage of. In other words, if it's a 2-2-2, there's even amounts of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and it'd be like I've seen 5-3-2. So you got like 5 nitrogen, 2 phosphorus, 2 potassium. So it's really, you're going to have to know your soils and know what you need.
Yeah.
And what you're growing too can matter too. What it is you're growing.
Even though for the most part, that's not what we do. I have done it. Like last year, I did that with the trees that I have out at the property. I just used organic fertilizer on them just because it was easier. It's
It is
actually a
easy.
great place to start if you're
Yeah.
just starting. If you have your first garden, do not frown upon yourself at all if this is what you
Yeah.
do. Because we all start somewhere, and it's a very easy place to start and get your feet wet.
That's why I mention it first as a very
Yeah.
viable way to feed your garden. I
Hmm.
would stick with the organics kinds. You don't want to
Yeah,
put
for
the
sure.
I wouldn't use the non-organic commercial fertilizers, but yeah, there's definitely some good companies out there selling some good fertilizers. I think it can get really expensive though. That's the biggest reason I
Yes,
don't use
it
it is
gets
not because I
super
think it's bad.
expensive.
It's because I think it's expensive. And
Yes.
I don't want to spend that much money on growing my food. I want part of the reason I grow is I mean, definitely nutrient dense food is the number one reason. Cost is another big reason for me. It saves me a lot of money to grow a lot of this food. Okay. A lot of people always joke about how expensive gardening is, but when you do it right, it doesn't have to be. It can be very affordable. It can save you a lot of money. I can grow homegrown tomatoes a lot cheaper than I can buy them.
Same here. Same
I can
here.
buy corn cheaper than I can buy it. You believe it or not. I used to think I could go to the farm stands and buy it cheaper. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I don't even think that anymore. I actually think I can grow it cheaper than I can buy it.
I think a
Um,
lot of people think that I see it all the time, like on Facebook and the internet, where people say, well, you can garden, but it costs more. And
Yeah, people say that, but
it
it's not
can.
true. It can cost more. Yeah.
But for me personally, we get way more out of our garden than when we put into it
Yeah.
financially.
And I think if you're doing everything, if you're bringing in all this stuff all the time and you're feeding it and you're doing it that way, where you're paying for all the stuff, it can. You
Mhm.
probably, I still think it'd be worth doing just because it's nutrient dense food
Yes.
that you're not going to get in the grocery store. Better for you, not sprayed, all these benefits, but
Mhm.
it's probably going to cost you just as much, if not more, if
Yeah.
you're doing it like that. So
And you
that's why,
might have to do that when you start out. If you're growing on land that is just really, really poor soil, like
yeah,
sand or something like that, you may have to bring in some
yeah,
stuff for a couple of
no
years and
problems
then
with that.
switch
Matter of fact,
over.
something I was going to mention in my updates is, I have peach trees. I have one peach tree. I had two. One died. Well, one got chewed up by a dog when it was little. It was a great last couple of years. It's been a great tree. I mean, it's put off tons of peaches. Right. This year, it's got a hard case of peach curl,
Oh
and
no.
the leaf curl, and it looks like it's going to die. Like I'm hoping it hangs in
Yikes.
there because I started doing a lot of the research on spraying it because I'm willing to spray this tree
Right.
with some fungal, stuff to kill the fungus. But you got to do that when the tree is in bud, like when it's
Hmm.
budding.
Yeah.
So at this point, it's like I can't really do anything to this tree. Just let it ride out the year and hope it doesn't die, and then prune it really good next year and spray it if I see buds. If I see buds coming out, I'm going to prune it and spray it. I mean, I'll prune it before that, but then
Are
if I
you
see
gonna pull
buds,
if it gets any peaches, are you gonna pull them
yeah,
and let it all go back
yeah,
into
I'm gonna
the
let it just help
roots?
itself. Just
Let
try
it
to keep it. Yep.
Yeah.
If it ain't, don't look like it's putting off anything right now. It's bad case.
Wow.
Real bad case. It looks like it's been burned with fire. It looks so
Oh
bad.
man.
It looks like you ever seen a tomato plant that gets fire blight?
Hmm.
That's what it looks like. I mean, this thing looks bad. Anyway, at this point, it's just hang on. But anyway, it brings me back to the point of um, feeding. I'm not opposed to bringing things on in my property that can help my
Right.
property. You help my plants and trees and things like that. So I would buy commercial fertilizer if it's something you need. I go way out of my way to do things so I don't have to. I did put some
Right.
links in for like the Haas, Dr. Earth. Is there
I didn't know
some
Azure Standard
I
had.
didn't either. I was doing some research and I seen they had some, and I thought, I bet it's a good product because they sell a lot of good stuff. So I did put a link in there to Azure Standards
So
and Dr. Earth and Haas.
speaking of Dr. Earth, last fall, I don't know why, but Walmart had this crazy deal on Dr. Earth, specifically
Mhm.
fruit tree
Yeah.
fertilizer. It was on clearance for like crazy, so I bought a bunch of it.
Yep.
And
Yeah, and I think
yeah,
it's a good way to go. You get it real cheap. It's not bad. I think the link I actually have too on there is like Home Depot or something that has
yeah,
it, and so that's one that you can definitely get at a lot of places. So yeah,
yeah,
there's some good options out there. Is what I'm trying to say, and so I have some links so you can get an idea whether you're using the links or not. I don't even get if you're going to buy it from Home Depot. It ain't like I'm getting affiliate money from that or something. I just wanted to give you an
right.
idea of what's
Yeah,
out there to so you know what to look for. I am big on making my own compost, but as you probably heard Rachel say earlier, it's been hard to make big compost piles.
when you're on a
We live on
small
small
lot like we
properties.
are,
Yeah, we don't have
yeah,
big properties, so it's hard to make these gigantic. I mean, I go through a lot. I had to buy compost this year because I expanded
oh yeah,
I built, 6 new beds. I had to bring in compost.
Yeah, I always have to because we live on a
Yeah.
sand dune.
I don't always have to, but this year because I expanded, my garden a lot, I had to bring in a lot of compost. So, but I do try to make as big a pile as I can. And I got like what I call compost corner. I got this whole corner in my fenced area, and it's just got like I got a 3 bin compost area, and I've got like I've got a one of them commercial like ones that has a lid and everything.
Okay.
I have one of those. I don't like those actually because it's not enough. It doesn't make a big enough pile.
Right.
I think if you was just doing a very small amount of compost, it'd be fine. But again, you're trying to I think for compost to really do really good, you want to have a minimum about a 4x4 square. It just seems to break down right. The turning,
yes.
It just seems like it gets the heat.
Enough heat.
It helps to build the heat up. Yeah.
Especially up here where I'm at. That's my problem here is you need about that much to retain heat through winter. Right. Otherwise, you're never going to heat it up enough.
I maintain that. So I maybe get, a couple piles that size basically throughout the year. It's not enough for my garden. It's not. So, but I do make it. And I put a link in. I have a blog post all on how to make compost. Compost it's just about adding the right amounts of materials of things that will break down your compost.
Right. The browns and the greens.
Browns and your greens. Exactly. And it's a certain amount of each one. I think I've done whole podcasts on that before, and I definitely have blog posts on it before. So I'm not going to go into the whole making compost, other than to say, you have enough stuff on your property to make a fair amount of compost. You do.
And a lot of
if you have leaves and grass and what was that? Sorry,
I interrupted you, which
go ahead.
Hate. If a lot of the stuff you can get for free.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And even if you have getting leaves from your neighbors or grass clippings or whatever, and then you got all the stuff in your home, like your food scraps, and you have paper and cardboard and things like that can go in there. You just have to keep your percentages close, the amount of which one of which, and that depends on what you're putting in, of how much brown and green, because some greens are richer in nitrogen than other greens. Some, so you have to the percentages are different based on what you're putting in there. But it's not that hard. And it doesn't have to smell. And if you got the percentages right, it really won't smell that bad. When you start throwing things like meat or dairy in there, that's where you can get some smell. But if you avoid those things and keep your percentages right, you won't get much smell. I'm not opposed to composting those things.
I'm not either. I just think
you want them further away from your house, and you might want them covered, because you will draw some rodents.
Those things in there, you're probably going to have a fairly decent size compost pile, especially with meat, because you want to make sure that gets heated up really good.
You're going to want to put that, bury that up in a little bit in there. You're definitely going to draw some raccoons and possums and rats and all kinds of things you probably don't want on your property. I generally try to avoid that stuff. If I'm going to do anything with that stuff, I would dig a hole and bury it. Say you got a garden bed that you're done with for the year and it's fall or something. Dig a couple feet deep or something, or 1.5 feet deep or whatever, and throw some meat in there. It will break down and it will feed that garden bed, and it would be fine.
I will say the best corn we ever had. I grew Wade's corn. Is that what you're growing?
That's it. That's what I was trying to think of earlier. Wade's.
It just clicked in my head. So I grew Wade's corn one year, and my husband was really into fishing that year.
Mm-hmm.
And we buried a small amount of fish in every hole with the corn.
Yes.
The way they always say the Native Americans did. We had a huge bumper crop of Wade's corn that year. That corn just grew like crazy.
Fish emulsion is a great thing.
Yeah. And we just buried it right under the corn.
And when we get into making compost tea, we can talk a little bit more about fish emulsion and fish.
Yeah.
But
stinky.
Yeah, definitely. So, just, and if you can make enough, you don't ever need nothing else. Compost, you could literally just amend your beds with a couple inches of compost every year, side dress your plants with compost throughout the year, and your garden will have plenty of nutrients if you have a good rounded compost with lots of stuff in it. If you can make enough of it. I, for one, cannot make enough of it. I can't.
Well,
not for the amount of gardens I have versus the amount of, I just can't.
And if it's in your soil, there's specific regions around the US that have shortages of boron or
it's true.
Yeah. So you may have to but you need so little of that.
Yeah.
that you could do that by getting some,
I prefer
Epsom
compost.
salts.
I actually prefer compost over
4X.
compost tea and
Mhm.
weed leach tea and all these things because it does so much for the soil structure, which I love. I love when you add compost to actual good compost to a garden bed, just the
Right.
feel, and you mix that in and the feel of that soil so much, the structure is so much better. Just for
Well,
digging and planting
yeah.
and just the aeration and the water retention, it does so much more for the soil than what compost tea can do. So you always want to add some. Like I will take what I get and I
Right.
try to use it where it needs it, but I don't have enough for the whole year to constantly feed my plants.
If your soil is doing good, your structure of your soil is doing good, you're not going to have to chip away at your soil to plant. You're going to be
Yes,
able to
that is
actually
annoying.
dig
Yeah.
in your soil. We tend to have sandy or clay soil here, and it can get compacted. But if you are putting a lot of compost on there, you will notice a huge difference when you
Oh,
pull your weeds, they'll come out easy.
yeah.
When you go to plant, you can just stick your finger in there. I mean,
Yep.
you're not going to need to chop it up to get your seeds
I've
planted.
been getting
It's
quite a few weeds.
nice.
Those new beds I made, I brought in all that compost, right? But there's been a lot of weeds. I had topsoil basically underneath of it, so a lot of weeds are popping up. But yeah, we
Oh
was
yeah.
out there. Me and my granddaughter was out there yesterday, and it was just like nothing. You just pull them up so easy. The roots
Yeah.
just, I mean, you even have those some of the worst ones, like those thistle was have the really deep like taproot. Even those,
Yeah.
you pull them up, it'd be like a 6-inch taproot underneath. But it just came up out of it so easy. It was amazing.
Yeah. It's really satisfying when it comes up
Yeah,
like that.
if it could always be like that, it'd be great. But then you get grass. Now, grass will like spread its roots
Ugh.
kind of sideways, and it's a lot harder to pull even out of compost. But yeah, those kind
Especially
of
that
weeds.
grass that's like the rhizome stuff.
Yeah, the
Ugh.
crab grasses and things like that. Yeah, they do horrible. Um, but yeah, so compost is great. Make as much of
Mhm.
it as you can.
Yes.
But since I can't make enough, I do a lot of compost tea. Like I make compost tea I think about 50 gallons once a month,
So
all
you
gardening
have gotten
season.
really into this. So tell us how to
Yeah,
do
I love it. And I want to talk a little bit about kind of what it is and how to make it. I want to kind of go through how to make it because, and I'm going to have links in for all the products I use because I do buy these
it. You
products,
took like
but
a class and stuff
literally
on this.
I'm fertilizing my garden for probably around $5 to $10 a month, my entire garden with the stuff I
Yeah.
buy and what I add into it to make it. So it's really inexpensive to make. And, and
Yeah.
it does great. It does great.
And we're not talking about a 10 square foot garden here. We're talking about your whole backyard.
No, I have 28 garden beds, 4x8 garden beds,
Yeah, that's a
and
lot. That's a lot of square
the
footage
trees
for
and
$10 a month.
shrubs. And yeah, I spray the entire yard with this stuff once a
Oh,
month.
cool. So tell
About
us
50
tell us how
gallons.
you're doing this because I know you like even took a class and read a book on this.
Yeah, well,
A
what I like
couple
about
books.
compost tea is basically just liquid version of solid compost, right? I mean, you're taking all the good
Right.
stuff that's in compost and you're drawing it out of that compost and putting it in the water, right? The only really thing you're not getting is that difference in soil structure that obviously that loose compost adds, but everything else you're getting, which is great. So I don't know, it's between 40 and 50 gallon. I'm gonna call it 40 gallon. I use a trash can. I think it's 40 gallon compost
Okay.
brewer. I linked to a YouTube video on how to make one of these. You can use basically any trash can about that size. And you're going to make a bubbler. You can use some PVC pipe with some holes. There's the video explains how to do that as well. So you're going to have to buy an air compressor pump. I have a link in the show notes to the pump I have. Works great.
Is
The
that just
video,
like a little fish pump type thing?
it's bigger than that. It's like a
Okay.
little air compressor, but it's only
Okay.
like $30. It's not that
Okay.
expensive. And you basically just plug it onto you're going to make this PVC pipe aerator thing, stick it down in there, and air bubbles are going to rise up through it. Okay. When you turn it on. So basically what's going to happen is you're going to put all this stuff that I'm going to go through in bags or directly in the water, depending on what it is. And in the water, fill this thing up with water. And you're going to run this bubbler for up to 24 hours, anywhere 18, 20, 24 hours. I like to go about.
So this is pretty quick.
Yeah. And what it does because of the stuff you're going to put in here, because of the aeration, because of you can't do this in the wintertime. It has to be like temperature has to be good temperature for growing things in the 70s, really.
Okay.
And it will make everything that's all this good bacteria and all the fungal activity and all the things that are in this compost are going to massively increase in this water and just fill this water up with it. And
Okay.
that's why about 24 hours and then it's going to be at its max. And then at that point, actually this thing start dying off. So really doesn't do any good to like brew longer than that.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, that's your max. Just go, but 24 hours, start using it. And yeah, this is now I've made mine to
Oh,
where I hang these bags in the top.
okay.
So
Yeah.
everything's kind of working through it, and I keep it all in bags. So
But you
I'll have
add stuff.
I stuff everything in these bags. So I bought these mesh bags. There's a link to that in the show notes as well. And I run now on 40 to 50 gallons of this. I'm running about 5 to 7 pounds of compost. So so in other words, I'm going to cover my entire property with the benefits of this compost with about 7 pounds of compost versus like an entire like it would take 2 compost piles
Oh, yeah.
to do what I'm going to do with
Okay.
this 5 to 7 pounds of compost. Okay. And these mesh bags will hold about 5 pounds. Really.
Okay.
I usually hang a couple of them in there full of compost, and you want a good, well-rounded, good finished compost.
Okay.
You want a good compost. It's got lots of just a variety of things in it. Okay. And it should smell like soil forest. That's what it should smell like. Okay. Because that's got a lot of microbial activity in it. So I shove those in, I hang those in the water. I have a bar that kind of goes across of them, and I just like hang the bags on these hooks that I have hanging down, and they hang down inside the water. Okay. And then then I dump a couple tablespoons of humic acid. Now, what is humic acid? You can buy humic acid, or you can make it really, really easy. You can take a pound of compost, of your good finished compost, and hang it in some cheesecloth and pour some rainwater through it and have a bucket underneath of it. Everything that runs through, pour it through slowly and let it just kind of drain through that compost and run through the cheesecloth. That's humic acid.
Okay.
That's how you make your own humic acid, or you can buy it.
See, I did not know that.
Yeah. And you just
Like
add
that.
a couple,
Okay.
and even though your compost is going to have something, this is going to kind of inject it quicker. It's going to make it get going. And
Right.
actually
It's like
break down things.
concentrated.
Yeah. It's kind of concentrated, and it gets it working better. So you a couple tablespoons of that in there. You can put a little bit more. I'm not really close on that. I'm saying the original recipe, I think from Dr. Elaine Ingham I ever followed, said 2 tablespoons.
Okay.
I'm probably a little bit more generous than that with it, honestly. 1 cup of horticultural molasses. I think she recommends the blackstrap molasses. I use a horticultural molasses. Works
So
great.
she's using just table stuff, but you're using the horticultural.
Well, blackstrap is, I can't remember why that she prefers that. It does have an extra quality, and I can't remember what it is, something about the acid or something on it. Horticultural molasses, I think, works really good. And the reason is that's going to feed the bacteria. It's going to actually give it something it's going to give it something to eat while it's being aerated to grow. It's going to grow really fast in this. Okay. It's going to help it grow. That's what this is for. So you're going to add a cup of that. Just dump that right in the water.
Well, I have to pop in from the future. While I was editing this, I realized I left out one of the important ingredients that goes in my compost tea, and that is 1 cup of organic hydrolyzed fish and seaweed fertilizer also. I'll have a link in the show notes for that as well if you want to see what that is, but that makes a huge difference, and I wouldn't want to leave that out if I was making my compost tea. So yeah, just wanted to pop in here, make sure I included that so you guys weren't missing an ingredient if you went to make some compost tea.
2 tablespoons. Actually, I think some people use like 2 teaspoons of mycorrhizal inoculant. I dump a couple tablespoons of that in there. And I have links for all this stuff so you can buy. It's like I said, you'll buy this stuff, but it'll make more than 1 batch. You're going to get a few batches out of all this stuff, right? So you're going to spend a few dollars, but a little bit more than what it's going to make, but you're going to make 5-6 batches out of this at least.
But you get 40 gallons when you're done.
Yes. 40 to 50 gallons of this stuff. Now that's kind of like your base for these things right here, are your kind of your base for making a compost tea. Now I go above and beyond.
Okay.
And I'll take another bag and I will put a couple pounds of worm castings in there because I have a worm, I make my own worm castings. I have some worm beds, and I'll throw a couple bags of worm castings in there as well. And I'll hang those down in there. I think that can only be good, right?
Yeah.
And then I even go a little bit further and I shove a couple bags full of comfrey leaves crushed up, and I'll crunch them up good so they're really getting good and juicy in there. And I'll fill a couple bags of comfrey leaves and I hang those, and I figure whatever little leaching that happens from that, awesome. That's just extra stuff in my liquid fertilizer I'm about to spray here. That's going to give it a little extra kick, right? So I do all that.
Okay.
And that's it. And I hang all that stuff in there. I let it hang. I bubble it for I hook the pump up, I bubble it for 24 hours, I take it off. I've made a little tap on mine where I can either dump it I can dump it in buckets or
So do you have to use that all right away?
yes, don't make more than you're going to use right away because this
So
stuff's
you
going to
use
start
the
dying.
whole 40 gallons
I do.
every month.
But what I do, honestly, though, and actually, I've heard people say they don't think this is a great idea. But I have a spigot on mine where I can run that. Well, it runs really slow through a hose because I don't have super elevated and it's not a lot of weight. So it pushes pretty slow through a hose. What I do is I drop a sump pump in there with a hose hooked to it and a sprayer, flip the sump pump on, and I spray it for everything. I just go crazy with it.
So do you have to worry about filtering it? Does it get clogged
now here's
up in
the thing,
sprayer?
Dr. Elaine, no, you didn't put anything in there that's going to clog up a sprayer.
Okay.
Because it's all been put in bags. It's got any kind of substance to it.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people dilute this up to 1/15 even.
Okay. So you can make like a quarter of a batch if you had a small garden.
So you could even make more. Now, I don't because I ran into it. I did a lot of research on this. I heard a lot of people saying I don't dilute. Now, the only reason I would dilute it is I do make some to put in a foliar spray, and I'll put it in like a sprayer. And
okay,
I will
so you're spraying
that.
this on the ground, not on the plant.
I go around and I spray the soil. Now I do but I will put some of it in a sprayer and I'll spray the foliage too. Okay.
But you'll dilute that.
But I dilute that. I dilute it about 1 to 10 probably in that. But then what I do is I walk around with the hose and I spray underneath all the plants with the hose hooked to the. Now you could do it. You don't have to do all that. You could actually go ahead and dilute it, sprinkle it over the top with a watering can. That's a great way to do it. I would, and like I said, most people dilute it even to spray the soil. I don't, because I've read a lot of people and heard a lot of people talk about, I don't dilute it and it works great. And they get out their microscope and they look at the bacteria versus fungal. And when you see all that, and these are people who are doing that and they say it's perfect, it's working great, and I do that. And I do all this about once a month.
You started doing that last year, and did you see just a huge difference?
I did. I could tell instantly the plants were doing better. Yeah, nice. Things just seemed like they were growing so much better. Things just puffed up and got greener, and everything just seemed to be working so much better.
So you're using 40 gallons of this every month?
Yeah.
Okay.
Really a little bit more because I do go around and hit I go and dump it on all the foliage too. So I'll actually take a little bit. I'll take probably 2 gallons of it and dilute it 1 to 10. And put it in buckets and put that over the top of the plants too. So it ends up going to make it even more when it's all said and done. It's 40 to 50.
How long does it, outside of the 20 to 24 hours that you've got this brewing, how long does it take you to make this? 20 minutes? Half hour?
Oh, yeah. Within, a few minutes. I put all this in a few minutes. Yeah. My compost pile is right there. I just go back and scoop me out some nice compost, fill the bags. Yeah. Half hour. I mean, I'm hanging the bags, putting everything together, half an hour. Then I plug it in, let it brew for 24 hours. Next day I spend an hour unloading it all. And then I always go through, and because this barrel is also a rain collection barrel, I wash it really good.
Okay.
When I'm done. Cause I don't want the bacteria and stuff just accumulating and growing in my rainwater.
And how are you washing your bags? Loading them through the
I don't. Well, you don't have to. These are reusable bags, and you can spray them off and clean them and wash them. And you could spray them with anything that would kill bacteria. And okay,
so
but they are reusable. But I generally just grab some new bags. They're so cheap that I don't worry about it.
Okay. I didn't know if they were reusable. Okay,
they are reusable, and I have actually
used like hydrogen peroxide or something like that.
Yeah, I'll spray them with. I can't remember what I sprayed them with. I mean, you could use like an antibacterial soap or something and wash them. And it would probably do it because you wouldn't want to kill the bacteria, because you don't want to just keep on growing and growing and growing, even in your water barrel. If you're just using a water barrel, some people just dedicate a barrel to this and then wash it out and make it the next batch. And now some people, and there's a reason you don't use manure in this, because you were increasing that growth, and there can be bad bacteria in manure.
Yeah.
And now you're expanding that, you're hyper speeding up the growth of a bad bacteria, and you don't want that. So that's why, but there are people that would go as far as to do that. That's why you want a good finished compost. You can have manure in the compost, but it needs to be very finished compost. So you want to make sure you got finished compost, right? So that's how I would make it. I apply it about once a month. I think you could apply it more. I apply it once a month. I have not got out the microscopes and seen the activity and see if I need more or don't need more.
Did you buy your microscope? that you
I was,
wanted to?
yeah, I didn't. I never got around
Did you?
to it,
Okay.
but I should, and because it was fun. I was contemplating a lot of things last year that I didn't do, and I think I
I
talked
think we
about
all
that.
do that. We all get
Yeah, yeah.
enthusiastic.
But I think it is a good idea. I think if you really want to take your soil health seriously, I think it's a great idea. And if you want to know how
Oh
much you
yeah,
should spray and how,
for
intense you
sure.
should put it on versus, I mean, yeah, really, if you want solid answers to all this stuff, you should get a microscope and find out and see what the activity is. And because you want a good balance of fungal activity versus bacterial activity too, right? So maybe you want to skip, um, not, adding like the mycorrhizal fungi to it and not doing that, and
Oh,
just do
okay.
the compost. If you got too much fungal activity, like you want one or the other, you want a balance there.
That's true. That's true.
And really the only way to know that,
Is
there's a
with the
couple,
microscope.
you can actually
Well, you
witness
could
over time.
send it out too, but yeah.
Yeah, you could. And also you can tell if your garden's got a lot of, like, if you start pulling some of your soil back and you see a lot of the mycorrhiza, you see the little white through your soil. Like if you see too much of that, maybe you got too much going on there. I see a little bit. I think I
Yeah,
could
I
probably use
don't.
more.
I
I'll see
probably could use
occasional
more of it.
mushrooms popping up in my garden beds, not over too much though. I think I probably
Right.
have a fair amount, but I don't think it's hyper. So I think it's good. But anyway, that would be how you'd find out. Now there's some other things you can do. Say you're using some compost, or you're buying some compost, but you want to do some things you can add to. You can also make like weed leach tea. A lot of people will
I
call
have
that
done this.
compost tea. I do this all the time too. I used to do it more when I didn't make my compost tea, right?
Right.
But what is leach tea? Or it's an infusion tea. It's basically just plants that are soaked in water for an extended amount of time, and
Yeah.
you just let them break down, and they just kind of infuse the liquid, and then you basically just
Strain it
filter
out.
out, strain out your plants, and then you're getting all the benefits. It's basically, you're not having to worry about. It's really not a lot different than chop and drop in the sense you can lay this stuff all over your garden and let it break down. But if there's weed seed, you ain't got to worry about it when you do this.
Exactly.
And it goes further. It'll go a little further too.
Well, and the other thing too is you can use it right away. And
yeah,
you have this book somewhere on your blog and in one of the podcasts. But when you start to understand that weeds are indicator species, and that some of these weeds have deep taproots that are bringing nutrition up.
Yeah. Dynamic accumulators.
That's why you do the weed leach tea, because they're full of, weeds are not all bad.
That are really good for this. I mean, I would do about any weed except for anything toxic like poison ivy, poison oak, or any other kind of poison. I would not put anything like that in there. That could make it bad.
Or anything that has like some kind of growth inhibitor in it.
Yes. And if I seen something that looked like it had some kind of disease, I would avoid putting that in there. But anything else, I would like dandelion, comfrey, dock. I mean, nettles. I mean, there's so many good things you could throw in there. Just weeds that are growing in your garden. Shove them in there. What first? Get your bucket. This is a lot of times made in a 5-gallon bucket. This works really good in a 5-gallon bucket. And I like to use. Now you can make aerobic, or you can make anaerobic.
So I have made the anaerobic, but I did buy a bubbler to make.
My biggest problem with the anaerobic is the stink.
It stinks so bad. Yes. I don't know what it is about comfrey though. That it stinks so much worse than any other weed.
It's bad.
It is pungent.
Smells fine when it's green, but you start breaking it down and it smells bad. But if you make an aerobic, which you use an air bubbler, you'll get a little bit of smell, but nothing like anaerobic. Nothing like anaerobic. And what I like to do is use anaerobic. I make aerobic. I use a bubbler. I will throw a stone. You can make it without it.
I bought one last year just because the smell is too much.
Yeah, and I like making. There's some pros.
There's
and cons.
Some other benefits.
There are some pros and cons on both. There's actually some pros even with anaerobic.
Yeah.
But I find using a bubbler and making aerobic is the only way I want to do it from here on out because it smells bad.
Well, especially if you're a small homestead, you have to worry about what neighbors. Yeah.
So what we're talking about with an air bubbler is like these fish tank aquarium little air bubblers they put out the air for their fish. And you get like little stones. So you hook it to a stone, drop that in the bottom of your bucket, hook it to your little aquarium air thing, whatever it's called, air pump on the outside of the bucket. Stuff your weeds in your bucket. Put your weeds in there, fill it up with water. Turn on your bubbler, and 7 days later, you got a really nice weed leach tea that's going to have things like phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, magnesium, sulfur, copper, whatever those plants had in them is going to break down into that water. And you're going to put that in your garden. And it's really good. It's really good.
Yep.
It's a good thing to add. It's a good little just kick for your garden, pour around your plants. And I make quite a bit of that. And I think it's a
and
really,
if you wanted
really
to get
do.
scientific, like you got with your other one, with your compost tea, you could look into the specific nutrition that some of these weeds have if you wanted to aim more for something with phosphorus.
You had a soil test and you knew you were short on something, you could go after those things. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because certain for some reason, some of these weeds pull up different vitamins.
And it might
minerals.
True. And it probably depends on the soil. Like if you know your property's short on something, so those plants probably aren't going to have it. Maybe you need to go to the woods and get some of these plants.
Right.
And bring them home and do it, where that soil stuff is going to have it in the soil because your soil is deficient in it for those plants to even pull it out. It's a possibility. I'm just saying that's just something that's coming to my head right now. It's like
option. A little rabbit trail to go down.
Yeah. It's something, it could be a thought you might want if you're really chasing after specific nutrients.
Especially if you start looking into that whole weeds are indicators of soil, what soil needs.
I'm big on any way you can feed your soil as much as possible, because the more nutrition, the more great microbial activity it has, the more fungal activity it has, all this stuff working in proportion to one another and working right, you're going to have some really healthy plants and nutrient dense plants. And that's what we want. Now, there's some other ways. There's other things I do that you can do to feed your soil. You do as well. Chop and drop, I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
It's something that happens I'm doing it. I just can't do it. Easy. I can't do it at the pace of nature to feed the intense growing that we're doing on a homestead. Okay. Yep. So, but it's absolutely, everything I chop up, I drop. If it don't have disease on it, I'm dropping it.
Yep.
I'm chopping it up and dropping it. You put in here urine.
I put in urine because
and it's true. It's absolutely true.
Full of nitrogen, but you want to make sure, obviously if you're taking a certain medications and stuff, you don't want to use it, but you do want to make sure another reason you want, just like compost, you want to age it and you want to dilute it because it's very strong. Just like when your dog goes to the bathroom on the lawn and it leaves a yellow spot, but you definitely weren't going to want to age it and dilute it. I would only put it on soil. I certainly would make sure I didn't.
Unless you're on a tree, then you can just cut loose.
Yeah.
They can handle it.
So we found out
when we were doing the book study with Ben Folk's book here a while back when we did the book club. He was big on he spent like many pages talking about urine.
Well, Dakota Cohen also talks about it.
Yeah. It's
but
true,
it is true. It's full of nitrogen, and we just wash it away.
Yep.
And urine typically is quite sterile. I know that there's people that get into humanure and stuff like that. I have no experience doing that. If I did that, I would only ever do it on trees. Just my opinion.
Me too. Yeah, but, I'm just funny about it. I know people are fine with it, but I'm a little funny about it.
Me too. Oh, we actually had a local incident where some people got sick. So
yeah, you definitely want to do it right if you're doing it. You definitely want to get plenty of time to break down. You want it done. Yeah,
that's why I'm saying trees.
Years,
is a very
like 3 years.
Place.
Yeah.
But it is something that's wasted that does not get wasted by nature when you have bears and stuff going to the bathroom in the woods.
Yeah.
So,
but they're not putting it all in one spot every time either, like we would be.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah. So I had that down, and then I just thought of the whole ramial chips, which we've talked about a few times, where it's the tips of the branches, and those have the most growth hormones and minerals in them.
Yep.
There's that.
And you'll get some of that. You'll get some of that with chop and drop.
Yep.
When you're chopping stuff up, you're fresh, chopping it up. Yeah.
You
added the
I did add that.
Nitrogen fixing plants. Yeah.
I just said nitrogen fixing plants. You have things like vetch and clover, like green manures. Yep. There's some bushes that fix nitrogen. I also just thought of you can plant things like rye. We planted rye out at our property to hold back blackberry bushes. Rye actually has a chemical that it puts out that actually can help fight invasive weeds. So if you're having problems with, and I was reading that in this, I have this little booklet, a Story Country Wisdom Bulletin booklet. And they were talking about using rye to help combat crabgrass. And
really interesting.
Yeah.
I know
So,
Comfrey will stop it dead in its tracks from spreading.
will it? I'm gonna have to try
Oh yeah,
that.
well, it builds like a wall. If you build a bunch of plants in a row,
True.
it just builds like a root wall that nothing can get through. It's kind of amazing.
I am of the opinion that you cannot have enough of the Bocking varieties of comfrey.
No,
You just cannot.
you know how much
plant
I have
them
of it. I have tons of
around
it.
your whole garden and then chop and drop them all the
You
time.
say I think you got from some Bocking 4 from.
I have Bocking 4 and Bocking 14.
I gave you some Bocking 14 also, but I thought you
Yes.
got some Bocking 4 from somebody else.
From Nick.
Nick, okay,
So
yeah.
Nick gave me 4, you gave me 14, and then I have the wild and crazy one.
I have no 4. All mine is 14. But
Oh,
I think I would like to have some 4. Yeah, also.
I need to so one of the things that I've been trying to do, this is maybe a little bit off topic, but we talked about it before, is I've been using metal tags now because all of my other tags were fading or got lost. And now I am not sure which was my Bocking 4 and Bocking 14. So I'm going to have to figure out how to identify.
This is why I went to my journal book to put everything down. Because every time I put tags out, they get lost or they get or you can't read them. So I just started writing everything down in the book.
So when I figure out which one is which, I will send you the one that you don't have.
Sounds awesome.
And I will try to not send you any of the invasive species.
I definitely don't want that. I absolutely don't want that.
I am trying so hard.
You make sure you're very clear on which one you have.
It is interesting how different they look.
They do. Even the Bocking 4 is like the bigger leaves.
And the invasive one does not look anything like the other comfrey. It gets really tall and wild and crazy looking. You can look at it and go, that's wild and crazy.
Yep. I've seen it plenty out there. But you're right. Yeah, there's plenty of plants you can plant. You can use them for chop and drop. You can use them as you can even think about something like planting beans next to something that requires more nitrogen. And you just companion plant.
Beans are legumes,
Yeah, you can companion plant for feed your soil.
Well, and a lot of people do. And I don't know if people understand this, but with legumes, the nitrogen fixing plants is because they grow little nodules on the roots. Then they pass it down around in the soil to each other. Yeah.
But I actually heard that it's really when you cut it
off,
that's when it releases those nodules.
It releases it. So so it's a huge benefit. And that's why companion planting can be a really nice thing, especially if you have something like, that's why a lot of people would grow corn with beans. Because corn uses a lot of nitrogen. Yeah,
but it really, to me, is that kind of a, does that really work though? Because it doesn't release the nitrogen until after you cut the bean. So I mean, I guess you're going to pick the beans before you do the corn. So I mean, if you did that, then it would give it that boost at the end, probably.
Maybe it would be better to rotate it.
But it really wouldn't benefit it much during while the process both are growing.
True. So maybe it would be better, like, I'm going to grow corn here next year. So this year I'm going to grow beans.
Yeah, which is what a lot of farmers do.
Yeah.
Yeah, with soybeans.
But that's what that nitrogen fixing does, is they've got little nodules on their roots. So that's why that's another reason why you want to cut the plant and not pull it.
Yes. Plus it just leaves that stuff in there to break down in the ground, even if it's just rudder roots, even if it doesn't have nitrogen on it.
That organic matter.
Something for the microbial activity to chew on and turn into stuff. Yeah. So I did have one other thing on here, and that was vermiculture in place. I don't know if you knew what I meant by this, but
I didn't.
Have you seen these? Oh, I put a link in here on Amazon to one, but they're basically, you kind of submerge them in the soil, and it goes a few, maybe 4 or 5 inches deep down your soil. And they're vermicompost or vermiculture bins, and you put your food scraps in them, and then they got the holes in them, and the worms come in. And basically, you're doing this right in the middle of your garden bed.
And then all these worms now in the last month saw this.
Yes. Now here's the thing. When I first seen these, people were taking like PVC pipes, and you're drilling a bunch of holes in them and shoving them in and putting a cap on them and doing that way. And I've actually heard that doesn't work very good for vermicompost, because for the vermiculture, because you're doing compost worms, right? Red worms. Well, they don't really live in the soil like that. They live more on the top of the soil, and they eat the leaves and debris and things like that, right? More, not like earthworms that are down deep. And those tend to go down there. People are stuffing them down in the soil thinking they're getting the worms down deep, right? Well, these baskets that I'm seeing, they're only like just a few inches deep. So they're staying closer to the top. They're bigger. So they're like several inches wide. So they're taking up a little bit of space in your bed, but they're giving that where the more the worms are coming into it, living in it, and then it's kind of the feeding around your garden that way. So
So
I
what would
think these things would actually work better than the pipes down in the ground.
So what would you do in the winter with them? Because
Oh, I
here
mean,
they
they,
freeze.
I mean, yeah, the worms are staying in the ground, so they're not going to, you're not going to do, they're not going to work. They're not going to feed them probably. They're probably
But
not
aren't the
going to.
worms going to die? Like here they would freeze.
Well, I think they kind of like hibernate. They go down a little deeper and hibernate, don't they? Or,
I don't know. I guess I'd have to try it. But here
I
we
mean,
freeze. Like our frost footings on houses.
I mean, we
are
have
like
red worms in our soil all the time. I go out there and dig a hole and I'm going to dig out a bunch of red worms. So.
Might have to try it because I like that idea.
But anyway, I thought it was kind of interesting. And just to build it's a little basket you put, and I thought, man, you could just have one of those.
So
in each
much
bed,
easier.
Drop a few food scraps in this one, go to the next one, drop a few screws, and just kind of rotate around. And because I got this bathtub that's in a worm bed, right?
Right.
But this would be so much easier to do it in place and not have to be like trying to get those, because those worm castings are a pain to dig out.
That's what I've always thought they were.
Yeah, they're kind of a pain. And I thought, boy, this is doing your vermiculture right in place.
Couldn't you just even feed them what's right there in the garden bed too? It's like
the worms
so
are in these
easy.
baskets.
To me, it feels so easy. That sounds really cool.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought that's a good way to feed your garden. You're feeding them with worm castings, which are one of the like is the gold of the garden. It's probably nothing better in the world for a garden than worm castings.
Well, the other thing I thought of was leaf mold, which is
leaf mold.
Leaves.
It's the chop and drop. I thought about that and chop and drop. It's leaves are falling down.
But some people will get bags and bags of leaves from places
in the fall. This year, it's what I did. I covered all my beds up with just tons of leaves this year. It's what I did. I didn't grow any cover crops this year. I just covered everything in leaves. I just did.
I cannot wait
tons of leaves on
to
them.
be able to do that.
Yeah. You're gonna have 20. You got 20 acres of leaves. You're gonna have all you want.
Well, I probably have 15 acres of trees. So yeah, I have lots of leaves. The problem is the leaves that we have here have poop in them. Dog poop. So I didn't want them. Everybody in our neighborhood has dogs. So I wasn't even able to collect from people. So yeah. And I don't want dog poop in my garden.
Well, did you have any recommendations for folks on if they want further study on feeding their garden or understanding the soil biology or whatever, just this topic in general? You have any
I do. I actually have 3 books. One of them would be if you don't have a lot of time, but you want to just learn more about it. It's not super in depth, but it is more than enough. It's another one of those story guides that I really love. Mm-hmm. Like it's from a Story Country Wisdom Bulletin. It's called Fertilizers for Free. It's literally 30 pages long.
Awesome.
It just actually, no, I think it's 32. But it just tells you, it's a really quick delve into it. It's probably enough if you don't want to go deep into the subject. Mm-hmm. If you want to go really deep into the subject, really deep, I'm talking really deep.
Oh, wow. What book is that?
I'm holding up a book that is, let me get to the actual where the writing ends. It is like 980 pages long.
Okay. Yeah. Give me the title of this.
It is The Complete Book of Composting by Rodale.
Okay. Oh, I've seen
this is one that Joel Salatin has on his shelf and talked about having on his shelf and said it was the book on composting.
It looks like a Bible.
It is. Huge. And let me tell you, it's it covers everything in here. It is crazy. So if you really, really wanted to take a deep dive, there's your book. And of course,
and if you learn everything in there, you can use it as a self-defense weapon.
Yes.
That thing is gigantic.
It's a couple pounds. It's a couple pounds. And of course, they have reprints, but I wanted the original print because I'm a book snob.
Yep.
And so I have the original print. I really like it. So 1969. So good stuff there. Those are the ones I have. I see you have a couple that I actually have.
I figured I figured you'd mention a couple that I didn't mention, so I didn't put those in. But I have a whole stack of them here. Obviously, you had Nigel Palmer on the podcast a few weeks ago.
I was going to mention that, but I didn't.
Yeah, and so obviously his book is fantastic. You need to have that. I mean, I have that right here in front of me. The Regenerative Grower's Guide to Garden Amendments. That's a fantastic book.
Channel.
Yeah,
great.
One of my favorites has been one of my favorites ever since I read it is Teaming with Microbes. That book is just it's just a primer on all those things. Very good book. We've talked in the past about the Living Soil Handbook by Jesse Frost. Fantastic book. what I like about it is just so easy to understand.
That's what I like about the
Makes it
story
so
one.
simple. Yeah, so
Yeah.
simple. I
That's
came
what I
across
like
another
about
one called Grow Your Soil. Actually, the author of that recommended it to me. I had posted, I don't know what book I'd posted on Instagram, one of the other books, and the author of this book says, "Hey, have you read my book?" And I was like, "No, I haven't." So I got it, and it's really good. It's definitely
nice.
it's definitely really easy to understand, but it's called Grow Your Soil, and it's a really good book. I like the Ecological Farm by
that's a
Helen
good one.
Attal, and I had her on. It's a really good book. She talks a lot about using like breaking down the weeds and stuff. She's like planting like clover and all kinds of other things and breaking them down. Basically, she was mowing them into her garden beds and letting them break down her beds. And there's a lot of good little tips like that in there. Yeah, just really, really good stuff. Oh, actually, somebody told me that teaming with microbes, I think I mentioned it on Instagram the other day, and somebody came back and said they have a podcast. There's a Teaming with Microbes podcast. And I looked it up and I subscribed to it. I haven't listened to one yet. They said they really like it. So I'm going to start listening to that. Nice. And Jordy mentioned one. I mentioned a book. I asked if anybody else had any resources, and he mentioned a book.
Oh, he did mention one that.
And what was
I had heard of?
Yeah, he mentioned one.
Find it. While you're looking for that, I have one. It's called Let It Rot. It's an old book.
That was one of them. That was one of them that somebody mentioned as well.
Yeah, it's by Stu Campbell, and it's just a really good book. It's from 1975, so the illustrations are illustrations and not pictures. But what I like about this is the same thing as with the story ones, but it's thicker. It's just simple. It gives you exactly what you need to know. It has illustrations on how to construct the compost pile if that's how your brain works, which is more how mine works. So it's a really good book, even though it's older. It's just great. It shows you how to build
need to get that one
compost systems. So
you're the second person. Kirsty recommended that on Facebook, that book, and she also recommended one called Compost Coach by Kate Flood, and I've never read that one either. So that's definitely something that I want to check out. Both of those. I don't know anything about them, but you just recommended that other one, so that one was definitely one we got to check out.
I'm adding to your bookshelves, and now you see why bringing this bringing this full circle to the beginning of the podcast where you asked what I was doing and I said I was packing books. Now you see why I need to pack books. I literally have bookshelves and shelves full of books that I have to pack.
The one that Jordy recommended was Soil Science by Robert Pavlis. I've never heard of that one, but now I'm interested. Soil Science sounds like something I'd really be interested in. So.
Well, if Jordy mentioned it, it's got
it's good. I'm going to check it out. So there's a bunch of recommendations. We got recommendations coming from other people, from us, all kinds of recommendations there, folks. So I'll try to look up all the links for all these and have them all in the show notes.
I'll get you some links too.
And so anybody's interested in any of these, we'll have links in the show notes. But yeah, great stuff there. And I think we don't have to spend a lot of money to feed our soil. You can there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. And you can keep that soil looking good, growing good, keep your plants really nutrient dense, and strong plants fight off disease better. They fight off pests better, which I know is a strange concept, but pests go after the weak ones. They do.
Well, it just makes sense. It's the same with our own bodies.
It's just nature. It's the way it works. And so if you keep those plants strong, you'll have less pest pressure. You'll have less disease pressure. You'll have more nutrient dense food. There's a lot of reasons to feed your soil, folks. So hopefully we've given you a few ideas and a few ways to start getting started with that. And check out those other resources for even some deeper study and some even better ways to jump in there and go at it. So anything else you want to add, Rachel?
I think that's kind of it. If you're concerned about getting your soil up to par and you're growing maybe on a little bit poorer soil or a poor environment or just starting new, don't forget that you probably should get a soil test so that you can make sure that you're getting things going.
And if your soil structure is just horrible, like really clay or a lot of clay or a lot of sand, don't feel too bad about bringing in the necessary stuff to make it happen faster. It's fine. Make it happen. Yeah. So, that's it then. Until next time, happy homesteading. God bless.
And grow where you're planted.